Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us for episode two, featuring Mindy Cardenas, a meditation specialist and art psychotherapist. Is that correct?
Yeah, expressive arts, I would say. It
Okay.
expands. Yeah.
So I'm not completely sure what that means. Could you tell everyone else what that means?
So art therapy is it's sort of its own little bailiwick. So in art therapy, you're really doing a lot of two-dimensional work or things that you would see in an art class, let's say,
Okay.
which has a really supportive aspect to it. If you expand it to expressive arts, then it becomes more creativity, less things like two-dimensional processes. So you add movement, meditation, rhythm, repetition, those kinds of things like in action that are not always a part of an art therapy process.
Hmm. Okay.
Mhm.
So something that's coming to mind is like Tai Chi. Would that be an accurate example?
Mm, I think there could be something that may seem Tai Chi-ish, and I could see people. So let me back up for a second. There are people who train in Tai Chi and use it for expressive arts,
Hmm.
for sure. And from my standpoint, the training that I took in meditation, we definitely had movement meditation similar to that, and I incorporate it all the time now.
Hmm.
As an expressive arts therapist, most of us will take a step into something more specialized like Tai Chi, but we aren't always trained specifically to things like that. It's very much the therapist's personal um, flavor, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
So how did you get into something like that? That seems like a very specialized field.
a little bit. We have to go all the way back to, excuse me, when I was in undergrad. I trained as a fine artist,
Mhm.
and excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water. Allergies.
It's that time of year.
That time of year. I trained as a fine artist, and one of the things that I realized was a lot of things were coming out in my art. And
Mhm.
at about the same time, there was a man from a school which was an art therapy program, who came to my fine arts program and told us all about the wonders of art therapy.
Hmm.
So I stepped into this through that pathway. And then as I was an art therapist, especially I work with trauma and a lot of grief, it was clear that it wasn't quite enough,
Mhm.
right? Because what we know now is that there's a real physical component. And this was years ago, back in the 90s, when I was stepping into this. We didn't know that yet so much. So as I understood my job or I saw things in session, I started to train in it and then realized there was expressive arts. And so working with the Trauma Informed Therapy Institute, Kathy Malchiotti,
Mhm.
and several other people who are sort of pioneers in that realm, got some specific training in it.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
typically, when I think of counseling, I think it's the traditional model of
Mhm,
going to an office, speaking to a counselor, working through maybe some past trauma, then giving you some exercises to try over the next
mhm.
period of time. So it sounds like this may achieve the same goal, just using a different technique, just
Yes.
more of an expressive way of working through things rather than sitting down and talking like we would may normally think of.
We do both.
Okay.
Because there's a real component, if you look at the continuum of what we know is reparative or what we know can help us move through some of those things, storytelling is part of it, and not making up a story, but really what is your story?
Sure.
So that's part of it, but we might take it to a different level, where we add things that engage the body more, and then strategies that are body based, a lot of times, that help us not only build capacity for what we're experiencing, but also we can use in the moment, right? So if you're standing at the grocery store and things start to come up, right, because they always come up at inconvenient times,
Of course.
part of what we practice in session is what to do in those moments. How
Hmm.
do you dial it back and help yourself be able to stay in line and buy your groceries?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, that's so important, right? Because, like you said, you can't always anticipate when those triggers are going to evoke some sort of emotional response to something that you didn't even see coming, right? It could
Exactly.
be a sound, it could be a smell, it could be just a sight of something that reminds you of a past event. And
For
yeah,
sure.
getting through that moment can be extremely difficult.
Yeah, it can be. Um, which is one of the reasons that the expressive arts and then adding on meditation was so supportive. The expressive arts gave some really solid basis for some. I felt like I had things I could send home with people, for instance,
Okay.
right, that were practical applications. And then the meditation came in and it increased it double at least
Sure.
with that. So it is good.
So how'd you get into meditation?
My own personal stuff.
Okay.
So many of us, as you probably already know, who do this trauma therapy stuff, have our own traumas. Um, and I was trying the other day to remember when or how I actually got into it, but I was in college at some point, and I used to use meditation and yoga daily just to support myself.
Mm-hmm.
Fell away from it for a while, had some chronic illness and acute illnesses that happened and fell back into it. And then I decided I wanted to step into it more professionally and really know what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, instead of sort of being a tourist in it and guessing,
Sure. Yeah.
um, which has its place. But I feel like I really have not only the knowledge for meditation now, but I can link it back to the stuff I know as an expressive arts therapist and the
Mm-hmm.
neurocognitive and neurobiological components.
No, that's great. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, just like so many other people, I've been going through a difficult time and actually found meditation to be very relaxing. And on the days that I get up and do it, I don't, it doesn't happen every day, right? But you try.
Yes.
It does it helps put me in a better mindset and
Mm,
just really center myself to handle whatever is going to happen that day.
yeah.
So one thing I picked up along the way was like a walking meditation, so
Hmm.
kind of like what you're describing in a store, something that you can do in the moment just to like focus on your breathing, just kind of recenter yourself to whatever stress,
Hmm.
other external stimuli that you're feeling. And
Yeah.
it can be very helpful. Have
Very
you
much
ever
so.
worked with any of those types?
Yes, actually, that can be it's a little harder with Zoom, but
Sure.
we can do it through the screen where we do the walking meditation. It's a little shorter.
Mhm.
I was fortunate to study with Jack Cornfield, and he has solutions to almost anything. So as long as you're okay with practicing the way walking meditation works for you, kind of going back and forth in front of your screen, it's great. And then you can apply it to longer walks.
That's
It can,
nice.
hmm and I want to bring up a little point. This was something that I wanted to make sure people knew.
Yeah.
You brought up breath, which is historically and classically the way into the body,
Okay.
right? That's the thing that connects our body to the outer world and brings our outer world or inner world out.
Mhm.
And for some people, especially with trauma, it can be a little tricky
Mhm.
getting into the body in that way.
Sure.
So, especially when you're doing something like a walking meditation, you can lean into the sensation of things like the movement of your feet, the how your feet feel as they step on the pavement, or the cadence of your arms moving,
Mhm.
right? Those are also things that bring us to presence that maybe for some people would feel a little less uncomfortable, maybe is the word.
No, that's a great point.
Mm,
Something that I picked up along the way was meditation, as you're describing, is not always as we typically think of it, sitting with our legs crossed and our hands on our knees, or hands in front of us, or anything like that. It can be just focusing on an activity such as the feeling of your feet on the pavement, or your arms
exactly.
moving. Or I've actually found weightlifting to be meditative
Mm,
for me, because really, when you get down to it, it seems like meditation is just focusing on a specific activity in that moment to keep you present in that moment.
yes, let me tweak your words a little bit because I
Yes,
think
please.
people get this misconstrued as a new meditation teacher, relatively new at this point. Um, I'm learning these things, right? My own
Yeah.
misconceptions and what they actually mean. So, what you're describing, I would throw in the realm of mindfulness, right? And
Okay.
mindfulness and meditation are interconnected. They're like two sides
Interesting.
of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
The meditation refers to a sitting practice, basically, whatever that is, 5 minutes to 2 hours, people, whatever your choice is in there. In mindfulness, we're applying those kinds of principles of paying
Mm-hmm.
attention in the moment to what we're doing, more like an activity, right? And I know my walking meditation has its own name and those sorts of things, but in my way of thinking about it, um, applying mindfulness is like an active meditation that we can do every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's considered meeting ourselves where we are,
Right.
right? Instead of having a cushion that we sit down on. Both
Right.
are super important and have benefits, that we could list an arm's length long, but
Right.
a little bit different in focus.
Okay. No, that's a great point. Hmm. So, if you were to give people some tips, right, like over the next week or month that they wanted to incorporate into their daily life, what would be some easy things that they could do outside of course, tuning into your Meditation Mondays? You got to put that plug in there,
Yes,
right?
of course, do that
Great way
one.
to start the week. But just things that they could do on a day-to-day basis. What would you recommend?
Um, so I think one of the things that we already talked about, I want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah.
And there's more research coming out that I haven't really looked at, but that meditation has used for a long time, which focuses in let me say that slower, focuses in on our sense pathways.
Mhm.
And basically it's anything that's sensory we can use as a meditative component.
Okay.
And so I think, especially if you're thinking about going into meditation, being willing to explore what is your flavor is really important.
Mm.
You might be very interested in auditory or the movement component, right? All these different sensory pathways are just as valid as the other. And so finding what your space is, we're trying to make it, for lack of a better word, like a pleasurable way in.
Hmm.
What works for
Okay.
you, right?
Sure. It needs to be enjoyable. Right.
Just the enjoyable. Yeah. Um, we already talked about being daily, mindful of your daily activities. I think that's another really great one. And especially if, doing weightlifting and having the intention of mindfulness is great.
Mhm.
And then applying mindfulness when you catch yourself maybe spinning in thoughts.
Mm.
One of the things that I try to do with people is to bring awareness to our patterns, the patterns that don't serve us. And
Sure.
if we spin in thoughts, and that takes us someplace, or me, I know I'm always sort of going out when I'm trying to clean everything. I know something's happening.
Right.
Slowing down, pausing a little bit, and that gives us some room that we're not engaged in these habitual patterns.
Mhm.
Because what we know is the more we do the habitual patterns, the more patterned they become.
That's
And
right.
the more we can get in front of the habitual patterns and say, oh, look, I'm cleaning obsessively. I need to take a breath. Maybe I'm anxious, right?
Right. Right.
Then we start to change those patterns.
Interesting.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
So those are a couple. I mean, do you feel like there's more? I could throw some more out there too.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a few more, by all means.
Movement, get up and move the
Mm.
body,
Yep.
right? You're talking about moving meditation, or we talked about moving meditation. There's a lot of stuff that bilateral things really help support us. So,
Mhm.
meaning using I'm trying to get both my hands in there, both of our hands at the same time.
Right.
And sometimes we do that through drawing, right?
Mm.
Sometimes we
Sure.
do that through things like swimming or
Mhm.
karate, right? Get the body
Cool.
moving.
No, that's a
Um,
great point.
yeah,
And
I like that one a lot.
last week we had Sharon Chamberlin on, who is, of course, a fitness trainer, and that was one tip that she recommended over for people to do over this past week was to just move more, right? So drink water, and in drinking water, that ought to force you to get up from your desk or whatever you're doing, and go to the bathroom, but you're up and moving, which is the point. So it sounds like these two things are interconnected, just as far as health and wellness go.
Very much so. We get if I use wording from the meditation mindful zone, we get very much stuck in our small space of
Hmm.
our just ourself when we don't move, especially with this Zoom era, not just the small space, but like just our little focus on this little
Right.
screen. So anything that can break that definitely starts to move in a more mindful and healthy direction for sure. I'm glad that's so cool they overlap.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I really didn't plan it that way, but it's just a happy coincidence.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's great. And yeah, I think you're right with the Zoom and the emphasis on virtual education and virtual work, all of these remote environments that we're working in. It can be so easy just to focus on the screens, lose track of time, and then just be stuck in our thoughts or in our screens for hours at a time without even realizing how much time has passed.
Very much so. And there's another component that I'm not going to be able to speak to very scientifically, but there's a lot of scientific basis for how much the screens limit the brain's function, um, in terms of being able to be a more global kind of. Let me back up for a second. So when we have more of a global approach, we're more resilient, we're more elastic. We
Mhm.
can shift out of stressors, and as we're on the screen, more of those things diminish,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
become, we have less connection to the broader spectrum. But when you stand up and you move a little bit, you
Yeah.
know, every 45 minutes or so, you get away from that, your brain can come back. It comes back pretty fast, but sometimes you
No,
don't realize how trapped we are by the screen.
that's a really good point. So, and I think that's actually a great segue to wrap this one up so that people can go and enjoy their Sundays and get away from the screen, right?
Right.
But so before we go, could you give a little bit of information about your Meditation Monday tomorrow?
Yeah. My meditation Mondays are just a quick mini training to a certain degree. It's more like kind of what we've done, just a little bit of information, and then we go into the meditation.
Mhm.
Doesn't cost anything. Trying to build people's place to go, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes money can be a barrier. So free, and it will continue to be free. It's the beginning of a bigger thing. I'm working on a Mighty Network program where it's going to be more accessible. But for right now, we're doing Zoom, and you can get it through the LinkedIn
Mhm.
page, like I think through you guys, and then I also have a Facebook page under my name and things like that
Okay,
that we
wonderful.
can get to.
All right, yeah. So after we end this today, of course, we'll share a post with your name and
Thank
information
you.
in there, and then once a week we do share your Meditation Monday graphics so that people can see them and hopefully tune in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are recorded as well, just to FYI. And
wonderful.
I think so. I'm learning all this techie stuff, right? I'm not from the era of everything online. So I do have a YouTube channel that if you miss the Meditation Monday, you can go to YouTube. They're all there. It's under my name, Mindy Cardenas, and all of them, whatever you want to access as
Okay.
much as you want to.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the information. Thank you for your time today,
Very welcome. My
and
pleasure.
look forward to tuning into more of your Meditation Mondays in the future.
Excellent. Maybe see you tomorrow.
Yes, I hope so. Okay, thanks.
Cool.
Have a good Sunday.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.